quite some time ago, I made a video talking about the Bradley IFV. In it, I talked about a group of people called reformers who, to put it simply, have some really bad takes when it comes to the defense industry. One particular statement of mine seemed to rile people up. They don't realize that these people have no idea what they're talking about. It's why you get people saying stuff like the A-10 is better than the F-35. Seems pretty innocuous, right? Well, apparently not. So yeah, that made a lot of people unhappy. Many said it was a bad comparison, and that is absolutely correct. Which is funny, because that was the point of that statement in the first place. Just plainly stating that a ground attack aircraft is better than a multi-role stealth fighter is ridiculous, since they're so far removed and built for very different things. That being said, there were a lot of people defending the A-10 very vehemently, saying that it is in fact better than the F-35. So I thought it would be fun to step out of my comfort zone and compare the two on an air support basis. Disclaimer before we get started, this is not meant to start any fights or say the A-10 is bad. For the time it was made, the A-10 was a fantastic design. Now let's get to it. Commonly, people will say the A-10 is far better for close air support or CAS. So first of all, what exactly does CAS entail? Most people assume it means flying slow at low altitude, hammering the bad guys with everything from guns to bombs, with the close part meaning that the aircraft is close to the enemy. That's a common misconception. It actually means that the aircraft is striking targets in close proximity to friendlies. The aircraft could be in space, but as long as it's hitting targets close to a friendly unit, that's still CAS. I wouldn't blame you for thinking otherwise though. This even confused late Senator John McCain, who was very upset when he was told that B-1 bombers would be used for CAS in lieu of the A-10. In many cases, aircraft like the B-1 were actually preferred over the A-10, due to their greater range and response time. Keep that in mind. Now back to the original point. When people say the A-10 is better at CAS, what they usually mean is that the A-10 is better at COIN, counterinsurgency. In counterinsurgency operations, the enemy will have practically no air defense, so there's a preference towards cheaper aircraft. In this scenario, the A-10 is preferable to the F-35. Against pure threats though, the A-10 starts to fall apart. Something I've talked about before is the survivability onion, which basically goes through the steps on how to avoid dying on the battlefield. Don't be seen. If seen, don't be acquired. If acquired, don't get hit. If hit, don't get penetrated. If penetrated, don't die. This mostly applies to tanks, but it can also apply to aircraft. The A-10 starts things more or less at the don't be penetrated part. It was built to withstand 23mm anti-aircraft rounds, and also has redundant systems. Unfortunately for the A-10, anti-aircraft weapons have advanced to the point these really don't mean much. As noted in a report by RAND Corporation, survivability aircraft, aka aircraft that rely on armor, are no longer sufficient. In a pure conflict, the A-10 wouldn't last very long, at least not in a loadout designed purely for CAS. The A-10 can mount ECM equipment to make it more survivable in these spaces, but it does so by trading pylon space, and even then, its capabilities won't exactly be on par. For the F-35, it ensures survivability by not being seen in the first place. Using only internal pylons, which greatly enhances the F-35 stealth capabilities, the F-35 can perform suppression of enemy air defense, or SEAD. This is aided by its ECM suite, which can passively detect enemy air defense. After these defenses have been destroyed, they could then perform CAS with external pylons. That's in an ideal scenario, but it's a far better plan than throwing A-10s at the enemy, or using a wider fleet of specialized aircraft to accomplish the same thing. In terms of sheer payload mass, the F-35 can actually carry a bit more than the A-10, though in reality, the F-35 is limited by its fewer number of pylons. However, with weapons like small diameter bombs, the difference is negligible. Even with external stores, the F-35 is going to be much harder to track than an A-10, especially with its built-in ECM suite, which doesn't sacrifice external space. One of the main things people point to on the A-10 is the gun, which has achieved borderline mythical status at this point. The cannon was certainly good in the 70s and 80s, but in this day and age it's probably more of a liability. Against armored targets, the F-35's 25mm cannon has similar effects, being able to destroy engines, optics, and tracks, but has much less ammunition. With things like Mavericks, Hellfires, AGM-154s, and SDBs, cannons are more of a last resort than anything. The A-10's cannon is certainly scary to be on the receiving end of, but it also produces less casualties than a bomb will. Where the F-35 really shines is in the aspects I mentioned earlier, range and response time. Compared to the F-35, the A-10's range is pretty abysmal, and it goes without saying the F-35 is much faster, so it can respond to calls much more quickly. As mentioned earlier, these were highly sought after qualities during the War on Terror. For target acquisition, the F-35 is an ace on radar and DAS, whereas the A-10 has no radar, and only has the option for a sniper pod. Something else worth mentioning is that the A-10's effectiveness has been overstated in the past. During Operation Desert Storm, A-10s had armor kills over-attributed to them on purpose, since that was their job, and the army wanted to keep the appearance that they were great at it. The F-16 actually flew a lot more combat missions than the A-10 did, around 13,000 versus 8,000, and it did so with fewer losses. So why does the A-10 have such a reputation? Because of how A-10s operated. A-10s would often operate much slower and slower, using their cannons to engage light targets, so guys on the ground could get a good look at it, and know what aircraft is supporting them. For F-16s, they're dropping bombs from tens of thousands of feet in the air, so you're probably not going to know what aircraft did it, or at the very least, the experience is going to be a lot less exciting. Unfortunately for the A-10, the nature of CAS has changed drastically. Standoff weapons are more or less the norm now. To even come close to the F-35 in that regard, the A-10 has to trade too much. As far as the F-35 replacing the A-10, it's inevitable. How long it will take is the question. The A-10 certainly has its merits, but it's not worth keeping an aging aircraft in service, especially when more capable aircraft are available. Despite its mythical status, the A-10 really doesn't stand out when it comes to CAS anymore. That's pretty much all there is to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.